Ronnie, thank you so much for coming on the Easy Prey podcast today.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for having me.
So, can you give myself and the audience a little bit of background about who you are and what you do?
Yep, I can go ahead and do that. So my name is Ronnie Tokazowski. I'm a principal threat advisor with a company called Cofense. And one of the things that I do is I do a lot of work around tracking business email compromise. And for those who don't know what that is, it's a type of Nigerian fraud that scammers will pretend to be the CEO of a company and say, "Hey, are you in the office? I need you to do this urgent wire transfer." And from there, what happens is a lot of times romance scam victims get involved. We have cases of check fraud, invoice scams, and like 2 dozen other types of crime that most people don't realize is directly related back to that. So for me, I do a lot of advocating around explaining how this stuff works.
Awesome. And how did you get into the field? Was this kind of a natural course of things in your life? Was there a family member who was a victim that you got interested in because of it, or was it just someone at work said, "Hey, you're in charge of this now"?
It was very much that latter where it was like, "Hey, you're in charge of this now," and I kind of inherited the problem. So about 7 years ago, when I was here at Cofense, I had left, and I'm back here now. Our CFO had received a phishing email from our CEO and pretending to be Rohit. And what the CFO did was he came into the office. He's like, "Hey, Aaron and Rodney, we need to figure out what this is." So he was like, "I know this isn't Rohit. This is a Gmail account." I was like, "Why would Rohit be sending me this?" So we responded back to the scammers and we started engaging back and forth with them. We were able to get bank accounts out of them. We were able to identify where they were coming from. And from there, around late 2015, there was a lot of people who were seeing this business email compromise phenomenon targeting a lot of people in the security industry. So we made a mailing list that actually started tracking a lot of those things. And that list is still live to today, where behind the scenes, we're working with law enforcement, we're working with private sector, we're working with a lot of social media, financial institutions, just to get ahead of a lot of this. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to
it. Yeah, I have a little bit of a personal story of that as well. A small company that I was working for, the accountant got an email that looked to be from the CEO, same signature line. She didn't notice the email. She didn't pay attention to the email address, but it looked exactly like an email from him addressed to her, and it was, "Hey, I'm in a meeting right now, so I can't be reached, but I need you. We're working on this new project, and I need you to send this amount of money to this address,
it.
this bank account." Luckily, she was like, "Yeah, that just seems a little bit off." And I think the question was like, she didn't know which bank account she wanted him to send it. She wanted it to be sent from, so she went into his office to ask him, and lo and behold, he actually wasn't on a phone call, and he's like, "What are you talking about?" And so they realized really quickly what it was. But yeah, it's definitely not something that I haven't seen before or even been very closely related to. So you talked about this is kind of related to romance scams as well. So let's talk about how these two things are actually related.
Yeah, so the best way to think of it is, I'm assuming that you have a toolbox at your house, right? Where you
Yeah.
might have like a screwdriver, you might have a saw in there, you might have a hammer, but like if you're gonna go and like work on your toilet, you're gonna pull the stuff out of that toolbox in order to do that. So those scammers operate very much the same way, as when they're trying to go and do, as they call, a job of like the CEO fraud or business email compromise. They will pull from things such as check fraud, where they might try and convince a company to send a fake check to somebody, or they might go and pull from their investment scam, or they might go and pull from their invoice scams, where they're going to go and use an invoice in order to say, "Hey, go pay, make this payment for me." Or more times than not, we actually see romance scam victims as part of this. And the way romance scams are directly related to BEC is that in the case where you saw that person said, "Hey, go and wire this money to that account," more times than not, that bank account ties back to a romance scam victim. So those victims are now money mules who are entrenched in this, who are now facilitating a lot of these other crimes. And when you look at a lot of the fraud that happens with the victims, they may be cashing checks, they may be sending gift cards, they may have sent a lot of their own money to the scammers, but the scammers have realized that, hey, we can use these people to go and facilitate all of these other crimes too, and make a lot of money doing it.
And I assume it helps kind of further the romance scam if money is getting sent to the romance scammer's account, or sorry, to the victim's account at some point. Then they feel like, oh, this person actually is repaying money to me or doing what they said they were going to do for them.
Very, very much so, very much so. And so many people will go and give romance scam victims flack for like, why would you do that? You never see that. But the people on the outside, they're coming from it from a perspective of not realizing that there was a relationship that's been built, that there has been trust built over months or in some cases years. I've seen victims in it for over a decade in many of these cases. And that's one of the things that people don't realize is that it's not somebody who's just doing something willy-nilly. Like they have a whole background of truth that ties back to this story. Um, we've also seen cases where some victims will go and receive flowers. They might receive chocolates. They might actually receive those physical things. And in the case of money, when someone says, hey, you're going to be receiving this wire of $55,000 that is part of my inheritance that we can go and live or happily for the rest of our lives, just take 10% of it out so that you can keep it for yourself. Like those are the conversations that actually happen behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm.
And when you have that level of intricacy that plays into these stories, you now have a case where when you go and approach the romance scam victim, they can't consciously unpack that because to them, this reality here that they've lived, where they're working back and forth with the victim or working back and forth with the person they're in a relationship with, they're like, hey, I know this person, I've known this person for 5 years, but this law enforcement person comes over here, like this is a small thing where they're saying I'm committing fraud.
Yeah.
But to them, they've been operating 100% on the up and up. So it becomes very, very difficult for both consciously, physically, and emotionally for a lot of the victims to be able to just process some of this stuff and process the reality of like what goes on in many of these cases.
Yeah, I mean, I think the kind of the story that we often tell ourselves is these romance scams. It happened overnight. That they got the email in the morning, and by the evening they're wiring off millions of dollars to people they've never met before.
Yep,
And that's really not the perception that these people have of what's going on.
No, it's not. And because the reality of the situation is that when it comes to a lot of the stuff with the romance scam victims, that they've actually had relationships built. They're trying to find somebody to go be in a relationship with. They may have lost a loved one. They may be a widow. They may be a divorcee, where they're just trying to go and find somebody to love in their life. And that's something that as humans, we all want. We all just want somebody to love us. And when someone comes in saying the right words in the right order, that sparks your emotions, like that's what is the victims fall for. I had a conversation about 2 weeks ago with one victim, and that was her sentiment, was that for the person that she was speaking with, that she believed she was speaking with, they said the right words to actually flatter her. And because she was feeling a lot flattered and a lot more uplifted, that's what made her go for it. And it was something where, again, it's now human emotions that are at play here that we don't fully understand how these things work. And like some people will be so disconnected from that you could literally touch some of these people's arms and like they can tell you that it's like, okay, you're touching my arm, but I can't tell you where that arm is being touched. So it becomes there's a lot of physiology that's at play here too.
So has this, it really seems like it's gotten way more advanced than the old days of, gosh, I'm going to use terminology that when people would get someone in the accounting department would get a fax from the Nigerian prince. It's really evolved a lot from what it was 20 years ago to now. Do the scammers have a playbook in the sense that they're looking for? Oh, they had a spouse that died or a child that died, and here's how I leverage that life event to further this relationship.
100%. And what it is what the way they call it, they may not call it a playbook, but their word in the Nigerian case is called a script or a format, where it's a long body of text that they can copy paste back and forth to the victims. They know that they can get a lot of the elder folks in there. And that's why we see from IC3 statistics that a lot of your elder folks are the ones who are most heavily targeted with these type of scams. In addition to that, many of the templates that we've seen where we've been able to either buy them from the scammers or we've been able to try and collect them, they very much hit on those nerves of, okay, I'm single, I'm divorced, I'm widowed. That now plays onto those emotions. There's another element of romance scams that is coming out of Asia called pig butchering or investment or crypto investment scams, that some of the documents that we have from there very much lines up with that of, hey, we're going to go ahead and actually debug, and you want to play on the emotions, you want to build the emotion up, and they actually call that out directly in these tutorials. But what the worst part is that when it comes to the crypto side of pig butchering scams, that's the number one cybercrime right now
Hmm.
as of 2022. Business email compromise was the number one cybercrime 7 years in a row per FBI statistics. And for some of the losses, we know that we have money that has been sent to in 140 countries of 195 in the world. We have victims in 177 countries of 195 in the world. So that's
Yeah.
literally not, we have victims in literally 90% of the countries around the world as it relates to BEC and romance scams. So it's a pretty big problem that we're trying to uncrack.
And that's just what's being reported. And we know
Mhm.
that not everybody who falls for these things feels comfortable reporting it.
They don't. And that's one of the things that I've noticed is like the more I go and present about this stuff, the more people will come out and be like, hey, thank you for talking on this. We're now, and that what they'll say is like, hey, I was a romance scam victim too. Um, we have another person who was a victim. She's been advocating for it too. And she said she has been absolutely inundated with people coming forward saying, hey, I was a victim too. So the one thing that a lot of people need to understand is that while there is a lot of shame, while there is a lot of stigmas around this, there is no problems coming up and speaking about it. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to push back against that societal stigma and be like, no, it's okay to come up, and it was okay to kind of talk about this because it hurts. It's painful. There's a lot of other things that are going on psychologically and emotionally here that we're just now starting to tap into. But at the end of the day, we all need to kind of come together to understand this whole bigger picture of it.
So that leads to the question of like, have you been a victim of either BEC, cybersecurity scam, romance scam in some form or another, or close to it?
So if anything, I would say we'll be closer to it. And I don't know if I would have been a victim, but there's been cases where I've really questioned some of my own actions. And what I mean by that is because of a lot of the work I do in Nigeria, there's cases where I do help people on the ground. So I have actually sent money to people who are trying to learn information security, who may need help or may be struggling. And there was one specific case where I did it for almost 2 years of sending somebody $100. And the problem with that is that when you have somebody who is now saying, hey, I need this money, I'm starving, I need help, your emotions go all cattywampus on that. And it really takes a toll on you. And there were times where like I would be second guessing myself, be like, okay, is this something where I'm really doing the right thing, sending this person that money? And with a lot of victims, many of the things that they go through is that they don't want to be the one responsible for not providing that thing for that person. And like one of the people I had to recently cut off and everything, it was very much the same case
Mm-hmm.
where it's like, okay, I want to do everything I can to provide for you, but I truly felt guilty cutting them off just because of other extenuating circumstances. So yeah, it's very much those emotions that are at play that until we start understanding that again, there's a lot more that at play here for the victims. Like we're not going to get ahead of this. And
Yeah.
that's the thing is that for a lot of the victims who are now entrenched in this, they will go and they will have somebody say, oh, your lover is now in the hospital and they're getting ready to die. Or we need to have this other great business opportunity here. Now that person doesn't want to miss that opportunity. They
Yeah.
don't want to go and be responsible for having their spouse or significant other dying. And unfortunately, just with the way our minds and bodies work, we're feeling all of those emotions just as in order to process that. And again, just with the way everything is connected here, for a lot of victims, their body very much follows suit on that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like I said, it's elements of psychology that we're now just starting to understand, but there is so much more here for us to unpack that we're barely beginning to make heads or tails of it.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what's going to come out over the next couple of years in terms of research on scammers and scam
Mhm.
victims and what can be done to kind of help those that are scamming not scam people, but also help
Yeah.
those that are victims or would be victims to see maybe the emotional, the neurological warning signs versus
Mhm.
the maybe the typical red flags that we would tell people.
Yeah, and that's the thing is like for what I've seen with a lot of victims, like they very much tend to relate back and forth to people. So we've seen nurses targeted who are very empathic, where they can tell if somebody's not feeling good, and that seems to be like a prime demographic that we see where people are able to be much more tuned to somebody else's emotions as opposed to theirs.
Yeah.
For on the ground in Nigeria, we very much see cases where there's tons of people who's doing it, and I agree with you. I can't wait to see what actually happens. There's a lot of newer information security professionals out in Nigeria who's trying to go against the stigma, who's trying to say, no, we can go ahead and come raise from within and actually make it a lot better. And what they're doing is they're getting to a point where they can go ahead and they're now starting to be successful. The problem is you have millions of people who's doing this. You have different cult activities who literally dabble in black magic, voodoo, and human sacrifices in order to go and be better scammers. So
Mm.
it's a lot of dark stuff with how this really works, but it's a matter of humanity just kind of come together and again, making heads or tails of it and doing the best we can to understand, make the difference on that. So,
Yeah. So earlier you talked about BECs was the number one scam for a number of years, and it's now switching over to the crypto investment scams, the pig butchering. How are I think I've seen a number of attempts of that on me.
mm-hmm.
Um, and interestingly, my wife. Well, let me tell you what my wife and I have seen recently, and maybe you'll think that this is the beginning of pig butchering scams. So both of us have been getting a lot of LinkedIn requests from. They're always for my wife. It's always young, attractive Asian men. For me, it's young, attractive Asian women, and it's the introductions are, hey, they're always very vague in the sense of, hey, you seem like you have a lot of experience in your field and you're great. You look like you're a great manager and communicator, and I'd really like to get some input from you on growing my business or just to connect with you and become friends or something like that. And then, to me, that's usually just like, well, people just don't, that's just not the normal introduction I see from people. So I'm always leery about that. And I finally got one far enough to kind of tease it along. It was, hey, let's take this over to Telegram or WhatsApp. And I'm like, okay, you're definitely not a real person. Is that kind of one of the new hunting grounds, so to speak?
Yep, and that's one of the that's one area that we do see them targeting security professionals and professionals in general, where they will go and try and engage that relationship with you. They'll go and bring the conversations over to WhatsApp, and then from there they'll try and keep that relationship going. And then they'll usually say something like, "Hey, I have this really great crypto investment opportunity. You're going to get 40% on your investment week after week. Let's go ahead and see if we can go ahead and do that." And what they'll do is they will make it actually look like you're getting your returns. They may make it to where you can actually pull some money out to make it seem like you're able to go ahead and it's a two-way transaction. And it eventually gets to a point where when all the money has been invested that they believe they can get from you, they will go, and the reason it's called pig butchering is they will slaughter the pig and kind of pull the rug out from under you and take all that money.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the things most people don't realize is that is an element that is something at play here. We've seen some of the stuff happen on the on in terms of romance scams too, where there will be a romantic relationship to element to this as well. In addition to that, we've also seen cases where the pig butchering scammers will actually send you a text message and try and build a relationship with you like that. Like I got one yesterday from somebody named Jennifer, and they were like, yeah, I'm from Vietnam. I live out in California, and I'm just trying to go and build a relationship. I'm sorry I sent this wrong text to you. And that's one of the big things that they'll do is be like, oh, it was this missed text message. The problem that we have in a lot of cases, and we've actually seen this, is that for the conditions many of these scammers are held up in, it's human trafficking victims who have been trafficked from other parts of the world to go and actually do this stuff against their will. And we've had cases where our researchers have engaged back and forth with the scammers trying to get information, and the handlers have found that and realized it, and actually will send pictures of the person who's on the other end being beaten the next day. Oh. So it's very gruesome with some of the stuff with how this operates. If they don't meet their monthly quotas, they'll get beaten. If they don't go and do certain things, they'll go and be starved. They'll be chained to beds. Like it's horrible with what happens on the other end for many of these scammers. So
yeah, so it's not the perception that the hacker perception is it's the guy in his mother's basement with the hoodie and the lights turned off and 18 computer screens. The perception of the scammers are it's one individual on his cell phone conducting all of this. What do these operations really look like, and who are operating them?
Yeah, so in terms of pig butchering, what we believe right now, and this might get changed here 2 years from now as we get further into this, But on the pig butchering side, what we believe is we believe it's Chinese organized crime. Specifically, one of the groups we believe is it ties back to a lot of triad activity, also known as the Heaven and Earth Society. Unfortunately, that group goes back to like the 1700s. And if you look in the areas such as Thailand, Myanmar, and Laos, which is where we see a lot of these things, they will operate a lot of casinos too. So,
Hmm.
from a governmental perspective, we know that some of the individuals that are dabbling in the area have been sanctioned by the United States government. That was as of 2018 in one case. We also know that they've done human trafficking, prostitution out in the area. We know that there's a lot of methamphetamine that gets processed. They had a big drug bust a couple years ago. It was like 163 tons of precursor chemicals.
Ugh.
And kind of going back to that BEC case, a lot of people who are operating these things are doing so many other things as well. The unfortunate thing is that when it comes to tracking like a lot of these darker cult groups, I would call them, like Triad, they go back to 1700s. With Black Axe out in Nigeria, we know they go back to like the 50s and 60s, but again, they very much have that darker secret society cult like activity to them.
Hmm.
And with in Nigeria, like that's just one very case on that. I know I mentioned the human trafficking elements for the pig butchering side, but I actually had a really cool opportunity to sit down and talk with Nigerian law enforcement and Ghana law enforcement a couple of weeks ago. And one of the things that they said that really kind of blew my mind is that there's also elements of human trafficking from the Nigerian perspective too. Is that a lot of the boys who are going to do this type of crime, some of them will actually be trafficked from Nigeria over to Ghana, and they will actually be put in call centers very similarly where they're not being provided the best conditions. They will
Hmm.
go and are being held against their will to go and try and make money. So even this concept of all of these Yahoo boys are doing it on their own and they want to, that's not the case. It's we actually have out there's a whole it's a whole lot more of a complex issue than we realize.
Yeah, I mean, in some sense, maybe it makes it easier for law enforcement to get involved. Maybe it makes it harder. If it was a bunch of random individuals, then it's harder to track down. But if it's a criminal enterprise, maybe it's easier to break it up. But also, the criminal enterprise is going to be more well funded and more able to bribe law enforcement.
Yeah, and that's a problem that we have right now is I'll use Myanmar as a great example because we know that right there in the Golden Triangle, like we know that there's a lot of operations that happen there. The current government is a military government that kind of has authority. And while if you go and look up a lot of the politics, that it will seem like it's a Democratic government, you have the military who's literally sitting right there. And to give you an idea of just how deep this stuff goes, when that big drug bust happened several years ago, the head of their current military actually had family members who were involved in some of those, who were actually
Mm.
part of trafficking those drugs. So you now have international drug syndicates who are dabbling in human trafficking, who are hitting romance scam victims to steal cryptocurrency from the stuff here. And like this stuff sounds like I'm drinking like the conspiracy theory Kool-Aid, but like I said, if you go and research, like this is just how this stuff works. And like I said, it's absolutely insane with the intricacies of how deep this stuff really goes.
I mean, it's almost like you were talking earlier about the scammer toolbox of whether it's BEC scams or cryptocurrency investments or gift cards. Like the scammer, that whole scammer operation now just seems to be one of the tools inside the syndicated crime organization.
Yep, 100%. And like because of that, you now have that case with the crypto. Now you have a way you need to invest in the crypto. And what we see is we don't know if these are directly related, but the BEC actors can go and sell gift cards from their scams on different cryptocurrency exchanges. And when they go do that, they'll go and exchange Bitcoin for that. Turns out a lot of that cryptocurrency is coming out of parts like Asia and China. So is it something where those criminal syndicates are now funneling those those crypto investment scam funds up and laundering that other way? Like we don't know, but there's a lot of circumstantial evidence where it's a lot of people who are operating a lot of big crimes right now who are doing a lot of this work.
And how are they laundering? Do you know how they're laundering the cryptocurrency? Because it's, crypto's, if you can't
Yeah.
get it back to a fiat currency somewhere, it's kind of Sure, you might have billions on paper, but if you can't
Mhm.
pay your henchmen, they're not going to hang around very long.
So it's actually so laundering crypto is a whole lot easier than you may think. So one way that we've seen laundering, like I said, it was we will see them using cryptocurrency to gift card exchanges, and the way that that works is if you have, let's say you have $1,000 in gift cards that you want to sell, you
Hmm.
might be able to go and get $800 of cryptocurrency for that. So you're now able to convert that digital currency over to something like an Apple, an iTunes gift card, or something like that that you can use for other crime.
Hmm.
We actually did some work with some of the BEC actors where we actually gave them over $500 of gift cards to track what they would do with it. And we didn't know we were going to expect when we did the research, but we came back with a whole lot more questions. Like we saw them buying Amtrak tickets. We saw possible purchases from like a toy store out in Myanmar. We saw them purchasing TikTok live accounts through the Google Play Store. And it wasn't just like a one thing, it was like for 5 specific accounts for the card that we gave them. Um, and we saw a lot of other things too on there. Like I said, it was so many more questions than answers that we had on that. But that's one way that they'll do it is through the gift cards. The second way that we'll see it is if you go on any of these larger exchanges, you can buy and sell other cryptocurrencies too. So,
Hmm.
for example, I know that USDT is a type of currency that is essentially the same amount as having one face dollar in regard to that. So you can go and say, I want to convert, I want to sell this Bitcoin for that for that USDT, and you cash it out just like that. So in the past, it's been hard to launder that, but it's getting much easier with the wider spread adoption
Hmm.
of cryptocurrencies in general.
I mean, it almost sounds like when you're talking about the gift cards, like they must be selling them to unsuspecting individuals out there that are just now using them the way I might use a Target gift card.
Yep. Yep. And that's the thing is like when you go and if you go and use that, you have what's called what was the word that they used? I think it was a picker that was the word that they used, but you can essentially have somebody who will go and take that card, you will have them go do that shopping. And then once they go and do that shopping, you'll have that physical merchandise. Then they'll say, okay, send these Nike shoes in a FedEx box over to this address over here, which now becomes part of a reshipping scam where
Hmm.
you're now being an unwitting participant to go and launder those stolen goods for that person. So there's a whole, like I said, there's a whole lot more intricacies here that again most people don't realize. And even as simple as being like a secret shopper, like we've seen elements of that where they're like, hey, go to the store, use this gift card, then give us this some of this money back. Like those are pieces that we've seen for this too. So it's a lot of ways that they're using literally using humans to go and launder and do the work of trying to get the money and stuff from them.
So it makes me wonder: are these like single? Let's think of it as a company, single organizations that have every one of these tools in their tool sets, or is it that you've got individual smaller organizations where we're really good at converting crypto to gift cards, and then a different organization that's really good at the secret shoppers, and they're all kind of just working together, or is it one an all-in-one solution where this one enterprise runs the whole thing?
For the most part, from what we've seen, is people will be good in like multiple things and kind of facilitate for that. So like for example, we saw cases where BEC actors would collaborate with the romance scam actors, and what they would say is, "Hey, do you have a client?" And clients are the word they use to describe the victims.
Mm-hmm.
But do you have a client in New Mexico that can receive funds? And what will happen is for that BEC case, that victim would be the one to receive the funds, and that's kind of where you see that collaboration is where they will go and share their quote unquote client list that can go and facilitate these other crimes.
Mm-hmm.
With cryptocurrency, there was one scammer named Hush Puppy that would be a great use case to kind of walk through that. And with Hush Puppy, he was a Nigerian actor who was he was very popular on Instagram, had a huge social following. And what happened with him was he was arrested in Dubai for different types of money laundering. And some of the information that came out from that case was Raymond DeBoss, aka Hush Puppy, was doing things around COVID fraud.
Hmm.
He was responsible for different types of romance scams. And from what I understood, there was over like 1.9 million victims he had on his
Wow.
laptop at the time where he was arrested. And for some of your state level stuff, he was actually one of the folks who laundered gift cards and cryptocurrency for North Korea. So you now have elements of Nigerian actors collaborating with foreign state adversaries to bypass United States sanctions in order to launder money. Um, and I want to say that some of that stuff actually tied back to Lazarus Group here. So, like, your audience can't see me like flailing my arms, but I'm flailing my arms here. It's like half the time I don't believe the stuff that I see, but like I said, it's all of these stories are 100% real of how this works. And Hush Puppy was a great example where there were so many different things that they were involved in that it's hard to look away. And again, it's something where with that, it's a lot of things that they were involved in.
So was Hush Puppy running the organization, or was he doing it all himself?
So my understanding is Hush Puppy was one specific individual. I don't know what his org structure looked like, but I do know he was working with a lot of other scammers. For him, he was kind of at the top, if you will,
Hmm.
where there are a lot of other scammers who tend to be at that topper area and then they kind of push the stuff downward. I know that at the time he was arrested with his voodoo or juju doctor at the time, who was doing a lot of rituals to kind of help him be able to get money in order to kind of do some of these things. But you've also got other folks like Mumfa, like Naira Marley, who will go and do a lot of these other crimes, who sing very positive things about the scammers, but they're still not arrested on some of these cases. So like I
Hmm.
said, you can look up Mumfa, and like I said, he's one of the ones who has done a lot of stuff, and he's been in and out of jail doing these things. So,
And so you talked about there being this kind of correlation with, uh, voodoo and witch doctors.
yep.
Is that a different set of scammers preying on the scammer, so to speak, or is it a societal thing? Like,
Yeah. So
it's
I'm
just
going to
it's just kind of an odd connection to me.
yeah. So we're gonna get dark for a second. And earlier you asked like what is some of the things I like talking on, and it's explaining like the darker side of how this stuff, because again, it's like people just don't realize it. So in Nigeria, one of the things that from a religious perspective, you have a lot of tribal religions that are at play. So you have a lot of cases where what we would describe as voodoo are a lot of natural religion, not a lot of natural religions, if you will.
Hmm.
And the best analogy I can think of to describe it is if you have like a superstition where you wear like a lucky jersey, you might put a penny in your shoe for good luck if it's on hedge or whatnot.
Hmm.
It very much is kind of that similar concept. For them, what they call it is they call it juju, if you will. And for a lot of the scams, it's something where you may go to your native doctor in Nigeria and be like, hey, I want to try and manifest wealth, or I want to acquire this type of belief, or I want to try and get this wealth. And what happens is the native doctors will go and do different types of money rituals, as they're called, to kind of make it to where you can go ahead and quote unquote acquire that.
Hmm.
What we see with some of these cases is while that superstition, and that's, I'm not going to say one way or the other my personal beliefs on it, but what we see is a case where some of the scammers will go the extent of going through what's called a Yahoo Boy Plus ritual. And for definition of terms, a Yahoo Boy is a person who does some of these activities. A Yahoo Boy Plus would be someone who goes through one of these rituals.
Hmm.
And with one of these rituals, what they'll do is they will literally use a human sacrifice in order to gain some of these powers. So you will literally have to kill somebody to become a better Yahoo Boy. We have cases where they might have to wash over a grave with like a certain type of magical soap. They might have to go and have the blood of a lamb put on top of them in some of these cases. And these are some of the more mild ones that we know that happen over there. But it's something where again they truly believe that they can use this in order to go and do that. And it's a case where it's not a this isn't a case where it's like, oh, only a handful of people who do this. It's like it's truly baked into that. I
Hmm.
know I've mentioned the group Black Axe several times here, but Black Axe is one of those organizations where they very much dabble in that darker side of things, where they will go and do those rituals. Some of their hazing actually includes killing somebody as to say, okay, you're now part of the group. And because of a lot of that cult activity, many of the people will go and don't want to come out and actually talk about that. Um, BBC did a very great documentary a couple of years ago that actually walked through some of the things for Black Axe, what they do and how they operate. Highly recommend if anybody's curious about this stuff, but it literally has like 2 or 3 warnings before you're actually getting to the video. You're like, hey, this might be disturbing for some folks. So, like I said, that's kind of the way that some of this stuff works. And so many people will be quick to discount it, but because from a belief perspective, I feel like you have to account for that, because unless you're able to understand and kind of get in the scammers' heads, you're not going to be able to make heads or tails on this. And even like going back to the toolbox example, that's how they think about it. Is they think of it in terms of a toolbox. So now you can go and put your protections and mitigations in for that. So
Hmm.
yeah, I know that was a lot. I know that was a lot there, but
It's part of the overall process for them.
yeah, it is. It is.
So speaking of getting into the scammers' heads, you've talked to some of the people that were being trafficked, and they're participating because their life is on the line. If you don't do
Mhm.
this, you're going to get
Yep.
beaten and whatnot. For those that aren't being trafficked into this and where it's voluntary, what are their motivations and justifications for doing what they're doing?
So a lot of the motivations is, for one, just straight up poverty. In Nigeria, the unemployment between ages 15 to 35 is over 50%. So there are no jobs.
Hmm.
And for many of the people who go are pulled into this, it's you have a choice of going and being a scammer, or like not being able to put food on your table and living and like barely being able to live. And that's a lot of, like we were talking about earlier, where I've sent some money to over the people and everything. It's like I understand that, and that's some of the hardest stuff of working, is that there are a lot more things at play here than just bad people doing bad
Yeah.
things. Um, the second thing that very much plays to that is the societal stigmas, where there's a stigma where you can go and do this. And because of that, a lot of times we've actually heard scammers referencing reparations as a reason to go and try and continue scamming.
Hmm.
And because of that, they will be like, oh no, I can just go and again, their words, not mine here. They're like, yeah, we go and we scam the whites in order to take money back and everything. And there's a lot that needs to be done, but it's something where, in terms of how the scammers perceive that, you can't go and rob Peter to pay Paul. It's like it's a whole lot of theft and a lot of hurt that's really happening to the victims.
Yeah.
So
So in some communities it's just socially acceptable. It's if I were to go down and get a job working as a cashier at Costco. Oh yeah, you could do that, or you could become a BEC scammer. Either one
mhm.
is just perfectly acceptable in the community.
Yep. And I actually got into talking with one person during the gift card process that we were doing. We were able to actually get him to open up, and for him, he was 50 years old. He had lived a very hard life, and the only way that he was able to make money at the time was to sell was to make and sell shirts. And for
Hmm.
the sound of it, making a shirt from scratch, there's a lot of work that goes into it, to measuring, to acquiring the yarn and everything. And for him, he was saying that he could sell one shirt that he made for 500 naira, or about five, or roughly about $5 at the time, or no, it was $1.20 was a translation. So you can go and do all this work, put in this effort for a shirt based on your skill set, and sell it for like a little more than $1. And with a lot of that, and with knowing that that's how a lot of it is, that the concept of money is a lot different over there. And
Hmm.
for an average salary, like there people are make about $100 per month for the entire month, and that's a cost of living that it's not the best cost of living, unfortunately. And people don't understand that that's how far in poverty many of it in Nigeria are, is that that's how much you can go and make. Like I said, there's a lot of people who are pushing against that. There's a lot of great things that come out of Nigeria. There's a lot of amazing things that are being built, but like I said, it's a lot of work needs to a lot of work and not things need to be invested into Nigeria to kind of help build them out of that and actually provide opportunities
Hmm.
of, here's how you can go ahead and actually be successful and not be a scammer.
Is the government, in a place where they can help intervene in a positive? We're not talking about law enforcement side, but
Mhm.
is the Nigerian government in a position to be able to help, or is it just even the government just like, look? I don't say they're throwing their hands up, but it's like this is just a bigger problem than we can deal with. We need international help to raise an entire community up to the point where scamming isn't a viable option anymore.
There is also a sense of nationalistic pride where people, if you're a Nigerian, if you're Nigerian, like there is a huge amount of, it's very proud to be in that, to do that. And for that sense of pride, asking for help is something where there's people feel like there's a lot of shame in asking for help.
Mm-hmm.
So when it comes to the government, they try and do a lot of things on their own, but they do need that outside investment in order to try and bring a lot of that up from the inside. The problem is some countries will go and invest over there and make it seem like they're investing, but it's also a double-edged sword where if you default on your loans, then that now becomes property of another country.
Mm-hmm.
And we've seen cases from a lot of Chinese investors where there'll be high investment loans that will go and make it to where if they get defaulted on, that's now a port that is now under Chinese ownership. So I'm not going to get into the whole Nigeria China politics on
Yeah.
that and everything, but from a Nigerian perspective, they see China as very much somebody who's trying to help them out on that. Um, but again, it's something where it's very much a double-edged sword all across the board, and it's an extremely complex
Yeah.
geopolitical perspective, because you've also got areas of a lot of tribes out in Nigeria too, where you have the Igbo, Yoruba, who are part of some things too. You also mentioned the government aspect on that as well, and specific to the government, like you've got cases where some scammers are embedded into the government, so it becomes hard to know who to trust in a lot of that.
Yeah, I can see when from a Western perspective, um, if society is not functioning at its base fundamental level, it's hard for anything to happen or anything to change.
Yep. And I will say from a Western perspective, like it's been crazy just personally learning all of the complexities and the intricacies that play into Nigeria. And it's something where from a Western perspective, like I had to put a lot of those mindsets
Yeah,
aside and actually just start from scratch here, be like, okay, what do I want to learn? What do I want to know about it? And try and get into that mindset of, okay, here's all the stuff that's happened over the years. Here's historically what has gone on. Here is where certain people were taken advantage of, and now because of that, people are being taken advantage of. Here's why here's actually what plays into it. So it's very much, I agree with you in the case where from a Western mindset, we're like, okay, if this isn't working, then you need something to do something with it,
yeah.
where we just want to go and fix stuff. So
That's not a Western perspective at all. We can come
oh,
in
I
and
know.
fix everything.
Are you saying from a Western perspective we would be put our nose in places where they don't need to be? We would never do that. We don't have
Yeah,
a history of doing that over hundreds of years. Never.
yeah, and it's challenging when one culture wants to come in and say, "Well, you need to change your culture to conform to the way we see things." Yeah,
Yep.
it's really it's very challenging, and it's not as simple as, well, if people just had better education, then everything would be then it would suddenly change, or if people just had enough food, then it would suddenly change. It's a lot
Yep.
more complex of an issue than that.
Yeah. It's a level of neuroplasticity that you have to be able to accept somebody else's perspective, that while it may go against your core belief and your core perspective, it's a matter of being able to account for that perspective too. And it's not that it's putting your perspective in question. It's just that's how somebody else has done it.
Yeah,
And what happens is, again, we see this with a lot of romance victims, when that gets in question, the way our body reacts, it reacts in a stress response. And because of that, there's a lot of things that inhibit us wanting to go and see things from that perspective. But it's a matter of making the choice, be like, no, I am okay seeing it from that perspective.
mm-hmm. So let's change gears a little bit, and because you've done so much research and investigation into this, what should people be doing to keep themselves from becoming victims of the BEC scams, the romance scams, the crypto scams, the pig butchering.
Yeah,
You
let me
know.
go get my book over here. List item number one, two-factor authentication. And so many people will be like, oh, you don't need two-factor. No, do 2FA. It's your people are going to enter their passwords into things. Your human is unfortunately that weakest link. So you want to make it to where they can go ahead and have that one last protection before that password gets out.
Yeah.
The second thing, and again, I know I just said your user is your weakest link, they can actually be one of your strongest links. So it's a matter of having that honest conversation with them, be like, no, people will actually operate and do stuff like this. So you want to train them in a way to where you can actually empower them to say, hey, here's those things to spot. Very much with what you said, where that user was like, hey, this feels off and this feels fishy. They came forward, they talked about it. That's $250,000 that did not get sent. And that's great. That user listened to their gut instinct and they listened to their intuition. That's what so many people will ignore, is they don't follow their intuition on that.
Mm-hmm.
Thirdly, in terms of BEC, I would say establishing processes for how money is being wired out. How many people have to sign off when that $250,000 wire comes in before that actually goes out? What's the process to ensure that that's actually the vendor that you're coming from and not just some lookalike domain? And like I said, those are things that most people don't account for. And they're like, oh, we're not going to do that. But those are your easy wins right there. In terms of romance scams, those are very hard. And the one biggest tip I would say is for the victims is understand your own emotions. And what I mean by that is for so many victims I've spoken with, and again, this is reflecting on 7 years tracking this. I've worked with people who have been suicidal. I have seen people who have become shells of their former selves. And when we go and do anything, we will create these stories in our heads that make us want to hope, and we'll go and calculate that. And so many of the victims will do that, and their emotions will go with them. And when someone comes in and says, I'm in pain here, you need to check yourself, and you need to realize that may be a case of emotional manipulation. We were talking earlier, and you mentioned that a lot of times from the wording that's being used, it could seem like an abusive relationship. And that's very much the same case. Is a lot of the victims will actually share that they actually felt mentally abused. They felt worn down. They felt psychologically hijacked. And these are all sentiments that from that person with what they feel, this is how they feel. And this is from their perspective here. So these are cases where this is what we see happening. And again, from personal experiences from many of them, we need to account for that. And I would say finally, if it comes down to someone wanting you to invest in crypto, just don't. Don't. There is, I don't want to say there's no legit crypto opportunities, but we literally saw over $3 billion sold last year. Don't invest in crypto. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Said absolutely no one ever. I think Abe Lincoln, when he made the internet at first, I think that was his doing it. It seems too good to be true. It probably is. So,
yeah, and I think that's it's a challenging perspective to say, don't do this thing, which lots of people have actually made lots of money off of it, but you shouldn't do it. It's kind of a challenging. Well, when is my chance to make a lot of money in crypto? Yeah,
and then you have that, gambler mindset that plays into it. So it's like, okay, maybe I can go make this money. Maybe I can go do this, and that's why you see things like the lottery being heavily played here. It's that playing on that fantasy of, oh, I might win. What would I do if I won? I go buy a new house. I go do this and stuff. I would totally not invest. I go blow all the billions of dollars on that.
Yeah.
So,
yep, that's unfortunately what happens. So as we wrap up here, if people want to learn more about what you do, where can they find you online?
Yep. So I would say check us out at cofense.com. We do a lot of work around email security. We help train users not to click phishing emails, and we try and help provide resources for them to go and do other stuff. In addition to that, I also have a YouTube channel where I ramble on some of this stuff. It's Ronnie Rants is on the YouTube, or hit me up on Twitter under the handle of iHeartMalware. So I do love malware, or look me up on LinkedIn as Ronnie Tokazowski. So nice short American last names.
Yeah.
So.
We'll make sure to link all those in the show notes, because I think people are going to have a hard time spelling Tokazowski, although it's actually spelled exactly like it sounds.
Yep, like a taco katsuki. So.
But we could we'll definitely throw those in the show notes. Ronnie, thank you so much for coming on the Easy Prey podcast today.
Yep. Thanks for having me.